Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch, and today we're going to talk about 5 tips for growing larger onions. Now, growing onions in general, most people don't have too many problems with growing onions, but it's growing the larger onions that sometimes people struggle with. And so today I wanted to share my tips while I'm in our onion garden. I grow a few different types of onions. Of course, I grow the Walla Walla sweet onions. And those are for fresh eating. They don't keep too well. I also grow a Patterson onion, which is a storage onion, and I can enjoy that all throughout the winter. And then I mix it up every year on what kind of red onion I'm going to grow. Usually I've done like a red torpedo or what is it? Tropea onion. And then I've tried Desert Storm, Desert Sunrise, and a few other different types. So I haven't fully landed on my red/purple onion yet. I like to try different kinds, but always Walla Wallas and Patterson are staple onions in my garden. So without further ado, we'll start tip number 1, which is actually choosing the right variety. Now, up here in the Pacific Northwest, and specifically Washington, Oregon, Idaho, the not so much Northern California, but we are solidly, there's three different types of onions when you're looking at like a seed packet or buying sets or whatever you're doing. And there's the long day onions, short day onions, and day neutral onions. And so the Pacific Northwest, the northern part of that, like I said, all of Oregon, all of Washington, all of Idaho, we're going to solidly be in long day onions. And whereas probably around California is kind of day neutral, in the south it's short day onions. Now you may be wondering, why is this important? Well, it definitely is. So onions are photosensitive, and their bulbing is directly linked to how many hours of daylight there are. Now up here we know that we have really, really long summers, but we have really short winters. But onions grow during the summer, so that's what we're more interested in. So when onions are developed to start bulbing when you reach a certain amount of hours. And so for short day, that might be like, 10 to 12, and then day neutral is like 12 to 14, and long day is 14 and above. And of course we get really, really long summer days. The sun sets at like 9, but it's still light till like, past 10. It's really crazy. Anywho, that's important because when your onion is growing in like the seedling stage, you want it to focus on building that root system, building the greens, all of that stuff before it starts bulbing an actual onion. And that way it's got all of the groundwork laid to just concentrate on growing that big onion. If up here I were to try and grow a short day onion, my onion would have been bulbing started bulbing months ago. I can't remember when we passed 10 hours. I want to say, I know that we passed 13 hours about a month ago. Nonetheless, and I would have problems that I wouldn't get large onions at all. And honestly, I may not even get a decent sized onion. Now, day neutral is a little closer, and I've heard different things, good and bad, about day neutral onions. But considering how far north we are, I honestly recommend just sticking with long day onions because we have such long days. So that's really, really important. Also, fun, interesting fact, each leaf, let's see, no, you can't see. Got over here, each leaf here that you see represents a different layer of the onion. And so that's really important. You can kind of get an idea of how big your onion is going to be by how many. Now these are just the early stages, so there's not a bunch of leaves. They haven't really taken off yet, but they're just starting to. I can see, I should have filmed just over a little bit more. Those ones are starting to get larger. But anyways, so that's the first thing, is choose the right variety. Get a long day onion. I promise that is your key to getting those large onions. The next one is to plant them on time. Now, if you're starting seed, you want to start them really early, and that's like December, early January. It's very important to get them going nice and early so they have time to build those foundations, the root systems and leaves, and get ready and all that stuff. And also to make sure when you're planting them out that you're giving, I always see recommended is 4-inch spacing on center, meaning onion, 4 inches onion. And personally, I like to do 5 inches. That's something that it just gives a little bit more growth, and you really want to go for those large onions. And I'll get to it in the next point, but onions have actually really small root systems, and so they don't compete well. So you don't want other things competing with your onions, including other onions. If you're buying sets, which there's no problem with that, you have a higher probability of them going to seed, of course, which will be smaller onions because the onion is focusing on developing seed and continuing its process as opposed to growing a big bulb. But even when I've grown onions from seed, some of them go to seed right away anyways. So that just happens in a certain percentage of your onions, and that's okay. That just happens. The next thing, tip number 3, is that you want to fertilize. And that can be whatever fertilizer is working in with your gardening routine. For me, what I do is before I set out the onions and transplant them in, and I don't know if you can see it, not really because it's buried, but I actually put down a thin layer of composted chicken manure that's mixed with wood shavings, and then I put a fresh layer of compost, organic material, over it, and then put my onions into that. And that gives a really good base layer of slow release nitrogen, and it's natural, of course. You don't want to give them too much nitrogen, and so that's where like having your soil tested or knowing where you're at is a really good idea. But yeah, that's a critical key in growing those really large onions. Tip number 4 is keeping them well watered. I'd mentioned earlier that they have really small root systems, and you know that when you pull them out because you can see their root system, much different than a lot of other plants. And so you want to keep them moist so that way they don't have problems with growing. This factors into the other thing of making sure it's well weeded, because they won't compete well for like moisture, nutrients, sunlight, any of that stuff. Onions are terrible competitors. They're not like weeds that'll grow like in any crack in the asphalt or anything like that. So you want to make sure, our weather isn't too crazy, but if we do have like a week, like we just had several days where it wasn't raining, and I did bring out the sprinkler and get some watering in just to make sure that they're staying evenly moist and that they're nice and happy. And last but not least is tip number 5, which is to prune. I know that's something that a lot of people don't think about, like pruning onions, that doesn't make any sense or whatever. And I totally understand, but actually pruning is an ongoing thing with onions, believe it or not. It's not like the most important thing. And remember, if you skip a lot of these or some of these, you'll still get onions. These are just if you're trying to grow the biggest onion that you can grow. And so pruning starts, if you start from seeds, just when they start getting a little top heavy or it looks like they're going to be falling over, you want to trim them at about, 3-ish inches, and keep them nice and short so that they can keep growing. But when they get larger and you get all of those offshoots that come out, those are what you want to prune. If they're not sticking up or they're starting to bend over, you can just clip those off right before the bend. And that's important because once your onion, the greens on it, sorry, I'm trying not to move fast because of my ear thing, but can you see that? Yeah, I think you can. If that, obviously this is a baby plant, but if it was larger and it actually lays down, your onion will not bulb any longer. And so what you want to do is reduce the weight that's on the neck of that onion. Now again, this is when they're larger, not when they're little babies. And because once they bend over, you're done. Like that, as big as the onion is as big as it's going to get. And so with exhibition like onion growers that grow like those really massive onions, they actually will like trellis the leaves and or prune them or whatever it is to make sure that there's not too much weight, because the moment that that stem falls over, there's no more bulbing action. And so that allows you to prolong the time that they're in the ground growing, receiving the nutrients, photosynthesizing, and all of that stuff. So combined, those total 5 tips are my best practices for growing the biggest onions that you can grow. Again, that's choose the right variety, plant on time, fertilize, water, and prune. So I hope that that works for you. If you have any major tips, or not major, just any tips in general about growing really big, beautiful onions, go and drop those down below, or let me know if you like this video. I appreciate it, and happy gardening and happy onioning, and hopefully we'll all have really huge onions and we can hold them up to our heads. Thanks for watching. Bye.